So how did my game go from this to this? 1 year ago I started my survival multiplayer game, and until some months ago my world generation was crap. It was an old asset of mine that wasn't thought for multiplayer games. It relied on GPU computation through compute shaders, and that's all great, but servers with the GPU are quite expensive. And just to say, they're already expensive. So I scrapped all of the previous work and started working on a new one. This time I was going to use the full power of the CPU, with finally an IntelliSense system, because you don't have one when you're messing with shaders. To harness the full power of the CPU I had to rely on multithreading, and for that I used one of the few things that Unity had made right in the last years: the Unity job system. Along with it I used the burst compiler, which is practically just magic. And with a few lines of code I was able to generate a mesh lightning fast. Okay, but there are no hills, no valleys, no mountains, nothing. You know where this is going. I added the usual polynoise, assigned its value to the y-axis, multiply it with the value and change the scale. Okay, it looks bad, bland, shit. I've seen people add a variety of things, such as fractal noise, whirling noise, something noise. They are all great, but honestly, this is better. Animation curves are basically a way of representing a curve in a graph through these keys. You use the X to represent where the terrain height should be, and you use the Y to represent where the terrain height will be. So this, for example, is for the mountains. You see that for each increase of the supposed height, the final height is exponentially more high. You get the point. So we can make it here a high point, here a lower, okay, with a little bit more tweaks perhaps. Alright. Oh my god. In the meantime, I added a fall-off map for the island to take shape, and I also added some noise octaves, which gives us this more realistic look for the island. But at this point the number of vertices was starting to be a little crazy, so like I added chunks, like in Minecraft. Don't ask me how I did it, ask him. He's pretty good, so I stole his code. No, not really, because it's not compatible with the Unity job system. It's funny because I had to redo the whole thing. So for the material we can just do a height map and assign a texture based on the height. But what the hell, what? No, it looks horrible. So I searched the internet and the solutions I found were pretty good. This one seemed interesting. Each biome has its own temperature and precipitation value. To get those I used our two loved noise maps, made them depend on the height with our usual animation curves, and we got our biomes. As a proof of concept. And to actually implement biomes into my terrain, I had to develop a shader. Oh my god, why do you have to exist? This whole thing took me like more than 2 weeks of work, between adding some warp offset, normal maps, steepness textures, and optimization. But they look nice. Bellissimo. By this point you got my thought process, so it was like, what is missing? Of course, it's grass. You might think this is something trivial. No, it isn't. See, grass is copied a lot of times on the terrain, so a lot of instances, and in summary, low performance. To make it playable, we need a great level of parallelism and the rendering capabilities. I wonder what thing has these. Everything evolves around this particular function. Basically, I'm directly telling the GPU to render this mesh, this many times with this material. And for placing the grass at these positions, I used something called the transformation matrix. That is this thing. And no, I'm not going to explain that. It tells us the scale, rotation, and the translation of the object. And to retrieve this thing, I had to rely on GitHub. I stole this code. As for what kind of position is the one at the center of each triangle in terrain. So very few of them. And for the rotation is the one that is aligned with its normal. So that is basically where the triangle is currently facing. And of course at the end I checked if the position was in the biome I intended. And while I was at it, since a person couldn't help but ask for it, I added a way for the foliage to blend along biomes. And honestly, it looks pretty good. If you think the same, like the video and subscribe. Oh yeah, what is missing? Trees. I've got some help from this menace for rocks, trees, shaders, and this thing. I still don't know what this thing is. By the way, follow him on ArtStation, he's very good. Then I made a simple spawn script that uses a bit of polynoise, steepness and height values to determine whether or not to spawn the mesh. Something peculiar about this is that it's dumb. Like, Really dumb. It uses trials and errors to make it so that the number of spawned instances is the same as this. If you have a better solution, write that down in the comments, because I did not come up with a better solution.
Damn. Without sounds it does kind of feel dead.
So I started working on a different background sound for each biome, by just calculating the nearest one to the player. And for the steps, I used the texture created by the same algorithm that I use for calculating the biome, to know where exactly I was, and from that, use the sound effect that was appropriate.
So we have it. It is done. I suppose nothing is missing.